Hi, I'm Jacob Lopez. I'm the IT director for the school district. And thank you all for joining us tonight. This is a parent event for digital citizenship to go along with some events that we held today and tomorrow. So Jamie's been going around feverishly presenting at all schools. To give you an idea kind of a schedule. We finished one presentation at 1:45 and started another presentation at 2. So he's been running around engaging our students about digital citizenship. Just to give you a little bit of his background, he's worked as a high school teacher, also taught abroad and as a school administrator before joining Common Sense, where he's presented at Q conferences and at schools all around the country, maybe internationally, I'm not sure, but definitely all over the country, connecting with students and staff at various levels about digital citizenship. And this is kind of a re-engagement on digital citizenship as we move back to in-person instruction, just to open a conversation that we plan on continuing with parents and students next year. So right now he's been going around meeting with 4th and 5th graders, and next year we're hoping to expand that to other grade levels as well. And so that's enough of me talking. I'll turn over to Jamie if you're all set up, and thank you all for being here.
All right, you're the best, Jacob. Thank you very much. Can folks hear me on the call? I don't know if there's an option to chat or whatnot. Okay, I'm gonna. I guess I can't open my video, folks. So you want to give me that option, Jacob, or maybe you don't even need to see me, folks. And also, if I can share my screen. So, Christine, I see you. Thank you so much for seeing that. And feel free on the chat to let me know if my tone is a little off or you need me to elevate my flow, so you can do that. Thank you all. Again, 636 where I live, and here in Santa Rosa. I don't live here, but I've been visiting here for the last 24 hours. It's wonderful. I still can't. I can't turn my video on, but I will connect on that. All right, can folks see my screen? Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do the next time we're available. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share on the chat, I'm going to share this presentation deck. So you will notice as you click on it, Jacob as well as the district will have access to this, but you'll notice a few links that we'll reference. The intention, I think, behind this evening is twofold, really to help you kind of understand the baseline of what's happening with your students, or your kids, I should say. And then the second is to provide you some really practical tips on this Thursday evening, things that you can potentially do to start to have these conversations with your child. If at any point you feel the need to ask a question or perhaps have a comment on like how something works great in your household, by all means, either feel free to share them on the chat, or I believe we'll provide you an opportunity to unmute and ask those questions at some point. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to start with just letting you know both trends that I see nationally in the work that I do supporting school districts and parents. And then the other thing I'm going to ask you to do, or the other thing I'm going to sort of highlight, is to contextualize the trends across the district here. And so what Jacob has done, as well as what the district has done, is shared some created some student interviews for you all, and allowed students to kind of provide their perspective. And I'll share that moment in a second. Right, the first thing you should know on a national scale, we do this all the time at Common Sense. We provide these census reports, which outline how much time kids are spending and what they're doing online. And while most of this is geared towards tweens, those 8 to 18 years of age, what you'll sort of start to notice is since the pandemic, there's continuously been an upward trend of entertainment, basically screen time and what they're doing per day. And what we've seen at Common Sense is between this age group, we're seeing on average about teens and tweens spending about 8.5 hours a day. We haven't done anything at this point for the younger students, perhaps your child, but you'll sort of start to see this pattern here, right? So we know that the pandemic has created a space where kids are online a lot more, but we didn't know to the extent in which they were spending that time until recently. So click that if you want to see that. The second thing I want to point you to in terms of trends nationally is things when students are thinking about what media that they're viewing and what they're doing online. You will notice that the majority of the time, students and kids this particular age, are actually addressing or are viewing YouTube. That seems to be the big platform. The second thing you will also notice is that there's been an upward trend of using the platform TikTok. So that's a connection that you can kind of see on that level. Now, what I'm going to ask you to kind of think about, or what you're going to do, is we are going to now look at sort of student feedback. These are comments and testimonials that your students shared. So I'm going to provide you with some questions in a second. I'm also just going to pause to recognize that the one wonderful person and their child that came to visit me. So give me 1 second as I acknowledge their presence. You are awesome. Thank you for showing up. You're the best. Really appreciate it. Once we connect informally, this is a little strange, but I want to talk to you one-on-one if you have any random questions based on doing it, okay? Oh, don't worry about it. Yeah. All right. This sounds a little strange, right? We feel like robotic here, huh? All right, so I'm going to point my thing just so it feels like you can kind of speak to someone, okay? All right, so here's the work that happened out of the jurisdiction. I'm going to point a number of questions your way, but one of the things that I'm going to share with you is some of the feedback that we got from students. And so Mr. Lopez and some of the staff over at the district shared these questions. One is, what are the online spaces that our kids tend to be in, and where do they actually connect online? The second was questions around how, if they communicate differently online than in person. And then the third are, and probably the most poignant things are, if they're seen things or heard things online that have actually made them more uncomfortable. And what I'm going to share with you is just some testimonials that you can kind of see from students, right? And what I'm going to ask you to do is like read through them and look at some of the words in orange. These are some of the things that pop up to me as a researcher. So in this question, do you communicate differently? What you'll notice is a trend here, right? One is, are kids naturally switching into that language? Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly if your kid's on the line, but the other one is, yeah, I see different words like LOL, MAO, IDK, so on and so forth, right? So there's a language that we know that our kids then shift into. And if that happens with your kids, you may want to talk to them and decipher what all these things mean if you're not like hip with some of the language. Like we have an entire team that just gives us the lingo of what all these things mean, and I still get confused about some of these things. The second, the third and the fourth testimony that I want to highlight is how students kind of code switch, right? So the students actually feel, or kids often feel the need to, or are often perceived as being more shy in person. But when they switch into their online role, again, they're not turning into robots here. They're just being a little bit more comfortable in their space. What I want you to do is recognize that that shift is actually happening in your household. And that's where we want to kind of start to pivot to understand kind of how those communications actually look like and what happens for them. And then the final thing is just the point, or the last quote is, it's a lot easier, more comfortable to talk, right? So there's this ease of communication that kids feel the need to connect. Take a moment now, if your child is with you or if you're thinking about it, take a moment now to either reflect on what are the unique ways that you've seen your child connect on when they have your phone or they're on a particular device that you shared with them. Feel free to share that out loud if you get a chance to. All right, the next thing I'm going to point you to as you share these pieces are really what the point of today's conversation is about. And that is, are there things that we're seeing from our kids that our kids are seeing that perhaps make them feel uncomfortable? Now, the point in sharing these slides is not to then scold your kids to say, why were you on this particular platform? It's simply to share and to demonstrate all of the unique nuances of being online. So what you start to see very, very quickly are things that perhaps we all may be fearful of as parents. I know as a father of a 7-year-old that it's really, really difficult to hear and see that my kids or my child may have been exposed to this. But once you get past that shock value, what I'm going to encourage you to think about is how your kids are actually navigating these spaces. So first, notice the first testimonial and notice sort of what you see here, which is, I have heard my friends argue, but I'm able to settle them down, but there's nothing really disturbing that surprises me. What surprises me as an outsider is that our kids naturally take on the role of conflict mediators in online spaces. Now, have we equipped them to what those conversations should look like and how to resolve conflicts? That's really up to you. The second thing you'll notice is that there's strange things that sometimes happen. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes in this particular testimonial, they say things like there's weird noises. We've seen others from the actual data that tell us that our kids are experiencing things and hearing things that may not be developmentally appropriate, right? We're not talking about the curse words here. We're talking about things that actually happen in online spaces that can be a little bit more erratic, that kids will often say because they feel more comfortable and kind of taking out that rhetoric. And then the other thing on the other side that you'll sort of notice is when we start thinking about what kids are viewing, you want to look at whether or not they're viewing things that are appropriate or that scare or fear them. And then the other last piece is how digital media uses your child's exposure to online spaces to send them to online links, send them spamming information. It was really clear in talking to the kids today that there wasn't a good baseline. A number of kids shared that they had been spammed or that they were asked to click on certain links when they knew that they were actually playing a game. And then you also see this last piece, which is our kids, despite all these things that you share, there is a number of instances from our testimonials, and Mr. Lopez can provide you, Jacob can provide you more insight if you're interested. But generally speaking, our kids did have coping mechanisms, and you'll see it in the final quote, which is like, I'm generally safe online and I immediately block people who are rude or scam me. So one question you want to ask your child today as you have those conversations is, what do you do when you feel uncomfortable in these spaces? Try not to judge. Try not to say this is what you should do. Listen to them and empathize kind of how your kids are actually navigating these spaces. Take a moment now if you have your child next to you, or maybe even your partner, or you're sitting next to your grandparents or your aunt or your sister, and talk about how you might actually ask this question for your child. If your child is with you, ask that question. What are the things that you do to when you feel uncomfortable online? And if your kids are online and they're like, I don't want to talk to this strange person that's on the screen, then it's okay. You can do it secretly. All right. All right. I guess we connected on that. Oh, I could. Okay. All right. All right. I'll continue as a whole on that. Oh, that's okay, Jacob. I'll turn it on in a second. All right. So this is what we're summarizing, and this is like the big to-do for all of us today. If you're a parent on the call, if you're a child provider on the call, or a caretaker on the call, here are the three things that I want you to really focus and emphasize on. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, or I don't want you to feel like the world is going to hell because all these things are happening. There are three solid things I'm going to ask you to sort of do. And we're going to practice that just as we did today with the kids. The first is, I want you to teach your child how to recognize what we refer to as manipulative media. That is media that gets our kids to do something or continuously ask them to watch something over and over again. Kids, if you're on the call, it might be something like TikTok. If you're on it and you're constantly viewing something, you're like, well, I want to keep watching that. It's not a bad thing to watch TikTok. It can be challenging when you keep watching the same thing over and over again. That's what we refer to as manipulative media. We want you to help your child to recognize when that's actually taking place. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do in terms of the pain point is, I want you to think about when your kids are performing online. And let me explain this one to you. When we talk about online performance and affirmation, it basically means that my child can record themselves doing something for the pleasure of getting affirmations from others. Now, kids naturally want affirmations, but when they seek online tools to do that without the other support, it can often be a problem. So we want you to make sure you feel connected to that when your child is actually doing that. And again, we can practice that in a second. If there's any questions, I'm going to stop in a second to see if there's any questions either from the audience or from mom on the call today. The third thing is maybe making sure that you teach your child how to communicate when he or she is actually in front of or experiencing some type of online conflict. Now, that online conflict could be something really silly, like I don't want to play a video game, but I want my friends to stop bothering me. That could be, I want to make sure that I'm really good friends with this person, but I don't want them to say something. Whatever it is, it can be, you want to just teach your child how to communicate. So today what we did when we spoke with the students across the district, we asked them, what are you going to do to spread affirmation, to spread kindness out into the world? These are some really simple activities that you can do. But let's get into that. But again, before I do that, let me see if there's any questions or comments because I've been rolling through this. So I'll stop sharing my screen for a second. And okay, you guys see my face now? Sorry, it's a little funny, but I'm a real person, not just a bot talking to you all. All right. Any questions? All right, I'm going to pause to see Mom that's on the thing. All right, I just said some of the most prolific things I would ever say in my life. No, I'm just playing, but what I'm going to ask you to do is understand the tools. Take a moment to understand how the tool works for your child. And we provide on this slide a very basic sort of tips and ultimate guide of all sorts of um, tech apps and tech tools. I'm going to run through a few of them just so you are aware. Again, this is all completely free. There's no selling of any of information. So I'm going to kind of let you know, we're going to gloss through this very, very quickly. And if you're on the call, if you have a little one, I'm going to kind of share with this stuff. All right, number one is TikTok. And if you like know more than me, then just you sprout it out, okay? You can let me know. Number one is we know that TikTok has been around for a while. It's a video-based app that kids then record videos. Again, really glossing through. It used to be up to 3 minutes in length. It's actually much longer now. It's up to 10 minutes. Kids do a number of things on there, dancing, singing, comedy sketches, a number of things that I can't even begin to kind of profess. One of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is there's a 1 minute what is TikTok video. You can watch it if you would like to highlight kind of what the tool does for you. The other interesting thing that you can do is if your child does have TikTok, take a moment to look at what it is that they view. Like, is it funny videos? Is it cats jumping into water? What are the things that make them smile, right? Like, again, we want to suspend judgment for a second. We want to kind of just observe how our kids are navigating in these particular spaces. All right, the next thing that you all should know about is a tool. It's an app called Discord. This is basically, think of it if you are a professional and you use the platform Slack. These are ongoing messages that obviously people connect with. They refer to these things as servers. These are all different channels that you can speak to and connect on. Originally, this was a tool intended for gamers to talk about and to invite others to join in their game. And since that time, there's all sorts of things that happen on Discord. We've also seen schools use Discord. But basically, this is a way for kids to communicate over a number of things that they do in their life. The problems exist in the intricacies of how these things work, but overall, the tools are really intended for kids to communicate with one another based on their interests. So that's that connection. Um, I'll let you play on that stuff just so you know. And then the third thing that I'll share is Snapchat. And Snapchat has been around for some time. I'm going to share with you what those new features are. But Snapchat is essentially, in what it used to be, is disappearing images. These are images or videos that kids then take to replicate a number of things. The interesting thing about Snapchat, and if you use it or you know anyone that uses it, there are these things called Snap Maps, which basically their geographic locations or pinning of where your child is or where that person is doing their particular image from. So if you and I or me and Jacob were actually on a call, we could geolocate where we would actually be within the ecosystem of Snapchat. Now, only my friends would then see that, but something that you should know is that curation of images also brings with it location that could potentially not be only harmful, but could potentially be problematic for your kids as they engage with that. And then the final thing, I think this is mostly intended for middle schoolers, but we do see a number of fifth graders on it. And that is the Instagram. And Instagram essentially is a platform that's intended, I know most of you perhaps may have one or may not have one yourself, but it's essentially a platform that's intended to share videos and images, and it's all content that's curated. So if you like cats, you will have an entire feed based on cats. Now, if you like, gaming or flowers of whatever the it is, they're essentially a curated list of imagery as well as direct messages on that. And we can kind of talk about the posts versus stories, but I'll let you view the quick video. Again, these are 1 minute in length. You can kind of look at that for yourself. All right, that is sort of the how-to. I glossed over it. I can have an entire session on each of those. But what you should know is today during our calls, we talked a lot about Discord and we talked a lot about TikTok, and we talked a number of ways in which the kids, your kids were actually navigating these spaces when I spoke with at a number of schools today. And a number of things that they shared are how they were navigating, how problematic it was and how difficult it was for them to kind of navigate in these spaces and what they were doing about it when they were confronted with dilemmas. So at the end of the day, here's sort of what I'm going to ask you to do, and that is, I want you to think about the habits that you want to create with your kids, and I want you to recognize that once you create those habits, your kids will actually respond really well, just as they did to me when I presented to them. I'm a complete stranger, and by the end of our 40-minute presentation, I think Mr. Lopez can attest, kids were spouting out ways that they can actually spread affirmations in their online spaces. So what I'm calling on you, what I'm inviting you to consider is, what are the habits that you want to create in your space? So do me a favor now, take a moment, just because we're in a small community now, take a moment on the chat to type in, what are the habits you want to create with your child? So it could be being respectful online. It could be that if you're in front of your child, have these conversations now. And don't be shy. There's no right or wrong answer. So if you're like, I want, a child had to do 100 jumping jacks, that's also a really good habit as well. All right, Christine, you're the best. Thanks for being vulnerable. Being more connected with my child or what they're viewing. Yeah, I love that. It's a wonderful habit. Rafia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. I love your name. Setting time limits and sticking to them. That's a really wonderful habit to create, right? Setting expectations and even those transitions. That's lovely. Anyone else, feel free to type on the chat what habits they want to create. Mom, any habits you have here? Any? Yeah. Yeah, navigate. Yeah, that's a wonderful kind of piece, right? That whole public-private kind of relationship with your child as a whole. How about you? Any habits you're trying to create? Any like routines that you want to create online? Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I really love that. Yeah, I want you to be my 7-year-old daughter's babysitter one day, Kenya. You're really good. You're amazing. Thank you for that. That's absolutely right. So we have a number of these things online, and now it's really difficult to kind of share some of these habits on yourself. I want you to just consider what that looks like. And so I'm going to give you now tips on like what that can then look like as a parent to have these conversations starting tonight or even tomorrow. What this can look like, what language, what words to use to help your child to kind of decipher what it is that they're doing online to create these habits. So, for example, rather than saying you're spending way too much on that time on this particular device, rather than saying that, which is important, rather than saying that, we want to delve a little bit deeper and ask them, what did you see online today that made you uncomfortable, that made you laugh, that made you smile? Things like that, where your child can actually openly talk about things that they've seen and experienced that allow you to have much more deeper conversations than, Mom, I'm almost done. I just have to finish this game. Or, Mom, please, one more video. Like, these are really great conversations. Again, I don't want to negate the fact that time is important and we want to have those conversations. I've given you 15 minutes. It is now 12 minutes. We're going to transition in the next 3 minutes. Set your timer because we're not having this conversation again. Those are all very important kind of types of conversation starters, but we want to, as much as we can, try to develop those much deeper habits and connections. The second thing is addressing what your child is actually seeking based on the testimonials that we shared today, which is asking questions like um, how they solve or resolve arguments or conflict online. Hey, did you have any disputes when you were at school today? Hey, is there anything when you were on that particular TikTok video that you had a problem with? How did you resolve it? And only after they share how they resolved it should you then provide your insight. But allow them to talk through those conversations, especially if you have fourth graders, fifth graders, as they're navigating that developmentally. And then the final thing that I'm going to sort of encourage you to do as you think about the conversation starters is be able to affirm the positive things that they're doing online. And try to, as much as you can, to try to pay attention to what it is that they're doing. So if your child laughed with you as you're co-viewing a movie, really appreciate that. I really like that, how you then laughed with me about that joke. It sounds quite silly, but your kids need to hear the positive things that they're doing online. They need to hear that when they did log off at the time that you requested them, they need to hear that validation. So as much as you can, try to build in those affirmations so your child can actually fall asleep. Does that make sense? That makes sense, Mo? Any questions on that? Any comments? Anything like, Jamie, this is so impossible for me to do. I don't know why you're a public speaker. Like, get off now. All right. Well, if you have any problems, I'll give you, or if you have any dilemmas, feel free to unmute at the end. We're almost done, and I can provide that perspective. I'm going to share now kind of how I might in your position, and as I model for my own child, what it is that I'm looking for. So when I think about my child's development, I think about their social skills. In schools, they refer to that SEL. In my own family, they refer to as being able to build in some skill sets that makes them feel strong and like powerful in the moment, right? Today, I was so surprised. I was at this particular school where I'm at, and a child made the comment when I asked her, what are you going to do when you are approached by someone that makes you feel uncomfortable, something along those lines. And she shared, it was a dilemma. She shared that she wanted to build in her grit and her resilience. Now, for a child to say those words is powerful enough, but then to explain them to not only me, but the entire middle school class that I was in tells me a lot about how that child has actually developed not only the language, but the understanding of what these things mean in online spaces. I'm going to encourage you all to identify one of these things. Perhaps you're saying, I want my child to get off the device because they're constantly on it. Instead, what I'm going to invite you to think about is how they're building their self-awareness. Are you aware that you spent 20 minutes past the hour and I didn't have to remind you to get offline? Thank you for doing that. You're very self-aware. Those are languages and information that's really, really helpful for your kids. All right, how do you do that? It made it so easy for you. At Common Sense, we have these things, family conversation starters. And this is just one example. Again, you can click on this, you can click on this link, and these are really basic things. So the kids essentially just watch a quick video, and then you ask them a very basic question, which is like, what are some ways you can keep online interactions fun if you're building in like relationship skills with your child? So again, they might be a little cheesy in your own family, but you can modify them based on what you think would be actually helpful. All right, I'm going to stop there for a second, and I'm going to close, and I'm going to see if there's anything in the chat. Jacob, is there any questions that you see on the chat or any? Yeah, that's a really, really great segue. Mom, I'm going to give you a chance just because you're our VIP for the day. Is there any thoughts or questions you might have, or little one, if you have any other thoughts? Yeah, you're awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, let's close with what that transition looks like. All right, so here's the stage where I'm going to encourage you to think about and ask you to help your child identify manipulative media. During our tours today of all the different schools, one of the things that I did with the kids early on is I helped them to decipher what was fake and what was not. And I helped them to identify when they were feeling the amount of production that it takes to create an actual video. So they recognize what it is to be manipulated by media and be addicted by that particular thing. I'm going to share with you now kind of what that looks like. So you are aware that not all social media challenges, not all things that kids are doing are actually bad. Now, on the left-hand side, these are things that you were was referenced by a number. I think two of the kids mentioned that today, but also that you should be aware of. These are things, ongoing monthly challenges that often in platforms like TikTok are promoted. These are things that when kids want that affirmation, that positive saying, they might likely do, or at the very least might observe with their older peers as they get into middle school. These are some of the pressures, right? So let's just quickly see it so you can kind of understand what this could potentially look like. Right, so you can see the dangers in that, and if I were to continue to play the video, you might sort of notice that the fall take place and the injury that is a part of things like that, the dangers associated with that. But you also notice how it draws you in. Like, and for many of our kids that can't understand that these things actually draw them in, we want to be mindful that these things actually exist, and we want to talk about it. I'll give you some tips on how to do that in a second. But I also want to flip the script because kids are actually doing some really amazing things on TikTok and online that I want to be cognizant of, that you are aware of. So on the right-hand side, there's a huge trend. There's been a trend for about 6 months now where kids are taking and experimenting with messy substances, slime, and then sharing their goo and experiences. And to me, they're like young scientists, right? And if you are a parent and you're open to having your kids clean up messes, one of the things you can notice is the creativity involved in things like this, right? So let me quickly kind of show you. Again, this is posted on YouTube, but I've seen you can hashtag a number, or when you're on platforms, you can do type in things like creative slime or messy challenge. These are all things that you will see that correspond to kids doing some really creative things. So you can start to kind of see all the unique kind of slime craze kind of experiences. And what kids often do is we'll replicate some of these things and then recreate them, right? So again, you normally have sort of your influencer in these spaces, but the point here is like we want you to ensure that not all things are negative and not all what your kids are viewing are actually bad for them. There are a number of things that you can leverage in places like TikTok that you have that. And I certainly am not paid by TikTok. In fact, that there's many challenges that I see, but I also recognize its ability to communicate what kids really want to kind of talk about in these spaces. So that's your piece. So let me kind of give you closing thoughts on what you should do if your child is exposed and they want to understand, you want to understand this content, or you're really thrown back by the experience. First, talk about it. Talk about it. Try not to be the authoritarian father or parent that my dad was. It's just like removing the entire VCR. Again, I'm aging myself and saying like, we're never going to talk about this crazy content again. You want to talk about it with your kids, right? So have you ever experienced any online challenges? Like if you're my daughter on that piece, I would say, hey, what have you seen that makes you uncomfortable? And then you might say, oh, you know what? This is what I've actually seen. And then we can talk about some of these challenges, right? This next thing I'm going to ask you to do is ask them to think what they would actually do and what the challenge is actually asking the kids to do, right? And if you find that it goes against the values that you have as a family, you want to avoid that. We don't want to actually have conversations that interfere with what we want as parents for our kids. So those are what we're sticking to. And then the final piece is make sure that you acknowledge that sometimes as kids enter into middle school, that there's peer pressure, right? That there's often kids are asked by others to do something that they may or may not want to do. So what are the ways in which we can work with our network of friends to not actually engage our kids or to have responses for our kids so they actually can do that? All right, I'm talking your ear off. I certainly don't want to do that. I want to make sure that you are aware of that. Here's kind of the closing thing, and this is what I shared with the kids today. And I need you as parents to kind of know that that there's shock, similar to the milk crate challenge. Our kids, when they experience and they see these challenges or when they see these dances, they often want to replicate them. And I'm going to kind of share with you kind of what the shock is. We're going to see the shock. It's not shocking to view, but I'm going to kind of model for you kind of what this could potentially look like when you see these dances that come across as dances, but really they're extension of challenges. So take a look at a quick video and then you can kind of see it. Right. So if you see this, like, if unless you're a parent of a gymnast or a very flexible and talented sort of person, you can tell right away that it's kind of intense, right? If like someone were to jump on me, I'd probably like my back would probably go out. But outside of that, like kids really want to take some of these things and try to emulate it because they look at the ease of these videos. But once you look at these videos and once you can kind of talk about them, what you can kind of also start to talk about, as I did with the kids today, talk about how long it takes to create something like this, what it actually, how flexible you actually have to be, how long it takes to edit some of these things. And you can start to understand that there's nuances to all this. Again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is just simply what a child that thinks critically about their spaces can start to actually identify. All right, let me close with just kind of addressing it, right? So if you do have a child that just like participated in one and you got in trouble, or the child is really interested in that, what you want to do to resolve it is really quickly identify what actually happened, validate both those feelings, and then envision those options, meaning how can things be handled differently. Feel free to gloss over the rest of these tips for those parents that are transitioning into middle school as like just as a preventative measure for yourself. All right. You all are great. Thank you for listening to me. It is now 7:10. I'm going to give you back your dinner, or I'm in wine country. So if you are enjoying a glass of wine or tea or something, that you can get back into the assumptions that I'm making about what people do in Santa Rosa Valley. So, um, final checklist for you. Here's the final thing, and this is the final slide that I'll share with you. Here's the thing that, okay, Jamie, you shared a lot. I'm going to review these slides. What can I do tomorrow with my kids? Number one thing, remember this as parents, um, take a moment tomorrow, this weekend, to review what your child is actually doing online. If you need to go into that Discord, go into that Discord platform. If you need to go in that Snapchat, this is not a confrontation. This is an invitation. This is me to give you sort of that badge to say you're the parent to kind of review and assess whether or not what your child is viewing is meets your expectations. So review them, co-view with them, take a moment to have your child explain what it is that they do. And that if you're like, Jamie, my child doesn't talk to me about anything, now's your chance to reset those expectations about what the norms are of using devices online. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do is communicate, practice what your child can actually say when they are navigating tricky online situations. And I hate to be the person that tells you this, but no app will ever be able to protect you from all the unique nuances that happen online. So I want you to practice what that can potentially look like with your little one. And it could look something like this. I did it with my child, I believe it was last week, after 2 weeks ago. She saw something online. I shared this briefly with the kids, and she saw something online and she felt really scared because she just didn't. It was a commercial in between a clip that we were watching on YouTube, and she didn't know what to do with it. And I can sense it right away after viewing with her. And so we had to pause the video in the moment. And I said, "We just saw something that wasn't right. Do you want to talk about that? And if we want to talk about it, what are you feeling about that? Because I feel really uncomfortable. What are you feeling about that?" So now, are you okay if the next time that happens, we do something about it? Now let's practice. And that was a little silly thing. It was only like a 3-minute clip, but it took us 10 minutes to practice, to name it in the moment what we were going to do when we were grappling with something that made us uncomfortable. Practice those sentence starters and those connections. And then the final thing is, if you have a really great network and if your child has a really good group of friends that game online or participate in things online, consider collaborating with them, picking up the phone, and instead, or I should say, in addition to having play dates or connections, consider maybe talking about group norms that you all can abide by or support with one another. Sometimes as parents, it's really helpful if you have a network of parents to say, hey, you have my back with my child when it comes down to these experiences. All right. I'm going to stop my screen. I'm going to kind of say you got this. And if you need any questions, if you're like, Jamie, please come over my virtual home and tell my child what to do. I won't do that, but I can help to coach you indirectly if you need to. Let me stop sharing my screen and take any questions that you might have. Otherwise, I will be on for another minute or two as we close off and just simply say thank you. Any questions? on the chat, feel free to either unmute or ask them on the chat.
I do want to invite you. We're doing a webinar, so you can't unmute yourself. But if you raise your hand, I'm happy to unmute you if you'd like to ask a question with audio.
Thanks, Jacob. All right, wonderful, folks. Thank you, Janelle. Really appreciate your kind words. Oh, you're so kind. Yeah, tell your daughter, I don't know who she was, but this is an amazing school district. I love the kids here. They're so genuine, so nice. They stumped me on questions. They're just really amazing. So thank your daughter on my behalf as well. Good human beings here. Are there any apps you recommend for child protection? Yeah, Christine, I can send some to you. I'll send them to Jake that send them either via email to you, but we at Common Sense, if you give me maybe a minute, I can quickly look up to them. Again, my encouragement would be to kind of understand that the limitations of some of these protection apps, and not all of them, when we locate our kids, not all of them are safeguarded for everything. But if you want to start that way, to have ongoing conversations about to why, with your child, and then you can ease off that or build in some of those skill sets. But I will follow up with a quick link for you as a whole on that, just to give you a list of resources for you. Okay, you guys are great. I've given you back 15 minutes of your life. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your Thursday. I'm going to now talk to Mom that's in front of me and acknowledge her presence for watching this wonderful presentation online. Right. Wild show. If you have any other additional questions, please reach out to the district. Your child is part of an amazing school district that's doing some really great, amazing initiatives to help to support your child in these spaces. So rest assured that things are happening in a positive way as an outsider looking in. So, all right. Wish you a beautiful night. Thank you again. And Miss Christina, I'll follow up with a quick link to share with you. Okay, if you don't mind staying on for about 10 seconds.